Okay, we will start now. Oh. Okay, hello, dear guests. I would like to thank you all for attending today's workshop. I'm confident it is going to have a significant value add to us. Today's workshop is the third workshop, which will discuss the formulations of implementing Islamic microfinance. The workshop is organized by the ICCIA, represented in the holding company and sponsored by Al Baraka Forum for Islamic Economy. ICCIA, the Islamic Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture, is an affiliated institution of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, and is the sole representative of the private sector of the 57 member Islamic countries. It aims at strengthening closer collaboration in the field of trade, commerce, information, technology, insurance, reinsurance, shipping, banking, promotion of investment opportunities, and joint ventures in the member countries. Its membership is comprised of the national chambers, unions, Federation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry of the member countries. This series of workshops are considered to be a foundation to the project, which is targeting the establishment of the microfinance banks in the G5 countries, which are Mali, Chad, Mauritania, Niger, Burkina Faso. The first workshop discussed the microfinance direction, regional and international experiences. The second one discussed the challenges facing microfinance institutions. These workshops are all on YouTube. I need to remind you that. And you can visit the channel of the chamber. So I invite you all to watch them. Now let's start by introducing our speakers. We have Dr. Ahmed Tahiri, Dr. Mohammed Kraisim, Mr. Mohammed Dakhli, and we should have Mr. Baba Yunus, but he is apologizing for not being able to join us today due to abrupt medical conditions, so we wish him speed recovery. And we are waiting Dr. Zubair to join us. And let me introduce Dr. Ahmed Tahri. Dr. Ahmed Tahri, managing partner at Green for South in Casablanca. He has 15 years of experience in consulting, research, and training. Main experience in Islamic finance, conventional finance, sustainable finance, artificial intelligence, and financial technology. Welcome, Dr. Ahmed. Our second speaker, Dr. Mohammed Kraisim. He is a development economist with 20 years experience of working with Islamic development and financial institutions on strategies for sustainable development and social impact. He has formerly worked for Chambers of Commerce and Center for Enterprise in the UK. He is now heading the Islamic Relief Global Islamic Microfinance. He also is the founder of the GE Micro Group Social Investment Advisory Firm. Welcome, Dr. Mohammed. And our third speaker is Mr. Mohammed Dakhli. He is a project team leader in the Islamic Development Bank in the Economic Empowerment Department. He's working on the design and the implementation of the economic empowerment programs in the bank. Mr. Mazin also intervened as an independent consultant in the preparation of the Islamic Social Financial Report covering the Maghreb countries. Welcome, Mr. Mohammed. And we are waiting for Dr. Zubair to join us. I think he might join us later. So Dr. Zubair is the CEO of Al Huda Center of Islamic Banking and Economics in Lahore, Pakistan. He has over 16 years in the field of Islamic financial engineering, development of Islamic products, training and research, designing research-based workshops for Islamic financial industry, and running Islamic financial web portals and blogs. So it's an honor to have you all with us today. Thank you for participating. And before we start, let me explain the structure of the workshop, that each speaker has 15 to 20 minutes to present. And after finishing all the presentations, we will use the remaining time to answer all the questions. Finally, I want to make a couple of announcements that there is an instant translation to the workshop. You can choose it from the icon on the Zoom window below. And the workshop is streamed on YouTube and it is recorded, so it can be revisited anytime. Also, I would like to invite you all to participate in the coming events organized by the Chamber. We have tomorrow a workshop about achieving sustainable tourism, opportunities and challenges, the same time we have today. And we have our regional workshop on microfinance that will be on the 14th and 15th of June to be in Cairo with the cooperation with the Federation of Egyptian Chambers of Commerce in Egypt. So let me start by giving Dr. Ahmed Tahir's speech. Please, Dr. Ahmed, you can start.
Assalamu alaikum, dear guests and dear speakers. Thank you, Brother Ahmed, for the invitation. I would like, first of all, to thank the Islamic Chamber of Commerce, Industry, and Agriculture for organizing and to share some of my thoughts. So let me first share the presentation. I think it's fine. Is it visible for all?
Yes.
Perfect. So I'm going to talk about three aspects. First aspect is the main features or the main differences between Islamic microfinance and conventional microfinance. Then when talking about the challenges and perspectives, these challenges are for both types of microfinance. They are shared by Islamic and conventional microfinance. So I'm going to talk about differences and the challenges facing the microfinance industry at a global scale and at a regional scale, and also the perspectives, what are the paths of improvement for such an industry.
Thank you.
Okay. So let me start with the main difference between Islamic microfinance and conventional finance. And I spent 12 years with companion Islamic banks and Islamic insurance companies to settle their business model. And every time I come back to the same principle that is guiding the business model of Islamic financial institutions, that is based on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, is al-ghunmu bil-ghurm. This means, for the non-Arabic speakers, means that the one who deserves the profit shall bear the loss if there is any. I think this is the main principle that is guiding the business model of Islamic financial institutions of Islamic finance at a global scale. This principle is not only applied to the, let's say, the profit and loss sharing products, but also it covers all the other contracts, including leasing, sales contracts, and it is also governing the, let's say, the business model of Islamic banks and Islamic insurance and all the Islamic capital market instruments. I mean, this is the main difference. So from my perspective, I think that Sharia principles are not just orientating the industry, but it is framing the business model, a different, or let me say, an alternative business model for finance. So if based on that main principle, I can give three main features of Islamic finance, including the microfinance sector, three main features for Islamic finance compared to conventional finance. First, in the conventional finance business model, we find that the main, let's say, principle guiding the business model is the risk transfer principle. I mean, whenever you have, let me give an example of a term deposit. When you make a term deposit in a conventional bank, you transfer the risk to the bank. Means that at the end of the contract, the bank pays back the amount plus some interest rate that is guaranteed. And the bank does the same. It transfers the risk to its customers and it adds some points to the interest rate used. In the Islamic finance, we base our product on the risk sharing, not the risk transfer. It means when I make a term deposit, an Islamic term deposit, well, I'm sharing the loss and the profit. When I'm getting, let's say, an ijara or murabaha, the bank is involved in the operation and it bears some risks based on the nature of the contract. In the takaful as well, or in the insurance, it's the same principle. In the conventional insurance, we are using the risk transfer principle. In takaful, we are based on is superior to risk transfer. Well, maybe it's not the place to elaborate more, but I mean, this is one of the main features based on al-ghun bil-ghun principle. Second is that Islamic finance, let's say, well, conventional finance, it has no constraints in terms of projects to support. That's why we create what we call the ethical finance, sustainable finance, to put some rules, some screening criteria to allocate the funds collected to more or let's say less harmful projects. In Islamic finance, no, we are expected to support exclusively the Sharia compliant projects that are harmless or that has a positive impact on the community. Last aspect is the zero-sum game aspect. In conventional finance, there are instruments, especially those used in the capital markets, that are based on zero-sum game, which means that one part has or gets the profit that is equal to the loss of the other part. In Islamic financial institutions, all our instruments should be based on a win-win relationship. So in terms of principles, these are the main features. Well, in practice, we can find some deviations in some areas, but these are the main features that are characterizing or that are differentiating Islamic finance from conventional finance. When we talk about microfinance, generally, at a global scale, including Islamic or conventional microfinance, we have five major expectations. The first expectation is about financial inclusion, which means that all the microfinance institutions should provide people with access to financial services and products, basic financial services, account ownership, loans or micro loans, or maybe nano loans, micro insurance. These are just products that are adapted to the needs and to the capacity, the financial capacity of certain segments in society. Well, more than financial inclusion, second expectation is to contribute to the economic inclusion. It means that this financial inclusion should lead to economic inclusion. It means that we need to connect people with appropriate economic opportunities. I'm going to give examples later, but I'd like to talk about the M-Kopa experience in Kenya. Through the M-Pesa is a provider of mobile payments, which is targeting low-income people. In partnership with M-Kopa in Kenya, M-Kopa provides people in the rural areas with solar panels to provide electricity to them. And those people can pay on a daily basis a fee to get profit from these solar panels. And at the end of the period, the solar panel ownership goes to these people. Through this mechanism, the M-Pesa and M-Kopa, they equipped more than 100,000 of homes in Kenya through this technology. And what is good about this is that, we live in, let's say, urban areas. Electricity is something, easy to access, and we don't see its impact. But in rural areas, it decreases the deaths among babies. It enables businesses or commerce or shops to have longer hours of opening, which means more cash in. So it improves the quality of life of a lot of people. So the main expectation is not only to give access to financial services, but to connect those people through these financial services to economic opportunities to improve their quality of life and their, let's say, their daily life. 3 is to support very small businesses in terms of creation, to help people generate income and reduce poverty. I think helping people to generate income is the safest way to reduce or to eliminate or to eradicate poverty. The fourth expectation is to upgrade those very small businesses and accompany them to become, let's say, small and medium businesses, and to become eligible to banking services. I mean, this is just an upgrade process that microfinance institutions should contribute in order to upgrade those people. 5 is to enhance financial literacy and awareness towards microfinance instruments but also other financial instruments. These are generally the expectations from the microfinance institutions, including Islamic microfinance. Now, when talking about the challenges, I will have to talk about two types of challenges. First type is the endogenous challenges that are linked to the business model of the microfinance institutions themselves. And later, I will talk about exogenous challenges that are related to the external environment. When talking about indigenous challenges, there were many surveys. I didn't mention them here, but I can provide the links later. Well, among the, let's say, the challenges or the critics or the comments that we have on the microfinance business model is that we are practicing high interest rates because we have small amounts of financing with high cost of transaction. So we apply high interest rates and margin rates to financing products. Second, surveys showed that microfinance institutions are failing to support new businesses. They are more focusing on existing very small businesses, and they are filling the gaps in terms of cash and the treasury. So it means that we have less impact in creating new businesses. And this is one of the critics that were, let me say, advanced by a survey conducted by the World Bank and the University of New York. The third challenge is that, according to some surveys in many regions, few microfinance customers achieve the expected growth and move to the next level. It means to become eligible to banking, let's say banking financial products. So we have less impact in terms of financial accompaniment and growth of these very small businesses. And finally, we have noticed, or some surveys noticed, that there were few additional services and benefits that are provided, which means that we have less impact in terms of economic inclusion, and we are providing not enough economic opportunities to people that are benefiting from, let's say, Islamic microfinance services at a global scale. So for the exogenous challenges, and now here I'm focusing on our region, in the MENA region, the Middle East and North Africa region, but also on the Western African region and the Horn of Africa. We have the first, because microfinance is dealing more with the rural areas, at least in our region. So we have one of the deepest impacts we find the climate change. Climate change, for example, in the MENA region, we will have more droughts. Means more problems with water management, water scarcity. So in the dry regions, they will have more droughts, but in the let's say in the humid region, we have more floods. Means climate change is pushing the climate features to more, let's say, extreme conditions. So we will have in both areas water management issues, scarcity, or how to manage those catastrophic events like floods, etc. We will have problems with food security threats, agricultural challenges, and we have also challenges in terms of health situations. So it means that today our expectations towards microfinance institutions would grow. We are expecting more in order to tackle those issues. Of course, I'm not saying that that microfinance institutions have to deal with all these problems, but at least they have to contribute to the achievement of some of the SDGs, especially the climate action aspects. So what are the paths of improvement? Here I suggest 5 paths of improvement. First, adopting financial technologies, relying more on mobile payments, etc. It will reduce the cost of transactions. It will reduce the management and administrative expenses. It will have a good impact on the interest rates and the margin profit rates that are applied to the microfinance customers. 2, we have to link microfinance with Islamic social finance ecosystem institutions like Zakat, like Waqf. And I've just published my second book about how to link cash Waqf to financial instruments and to achieve sustainable development goals. The third path is reviewing the business model of microfinance institutions. If we introduce fintechs, if we bridge microfinance with Waqf and with Zakat, how should the business model be improved in order to tackle all these issues? Fourth is to build to start building sustainable ecosystems. And that's what I was talking about in my previous paper published in my first book about how an integrated approach to build social or sustainable financial ecosystems. And we have to partner with financial institutions to develop synergies and complement and to increase the complementarity between financial institutions and specific microfinance institutions. So I'll give some examples. For example, adopting technology, we have 3 technologies that I'm suggestion. First, the mobile payments. We can reach more customers through mobile payments platforms in different geographic locations at a low cost and with low cost in terms of onboarding processes, in terms of loan applications, and in terms of collection of debts. If we use this technology as requested, we can reduce the cost of transactions of the microfinance and of the micro loans or the microfinancing or the nano loans. We have crowdfunding platforms. It provides new opportunities to these people. So maybe microfinance institutions, to reduce the cost of financing, they can use these technologies. And finally, the artificial intelligence. We can have scoring algorithms based on AI so that we can reduce also the risk assessment process. So these are the technologies I'm suggesting. That we can use blockchain, we can use other technologies depending on the objectives and the purposes of such digitization. So I discussed about the M-Pesa. So here's the model I already presented, is that we have to use technology to connect people to economic opportunities. And last year we published with when I was at the Ali Group, we had published a report with the ICB Institute about how to connect fintech to SDGs, or how to connect Islamic finance to SDGs through fintech. And we mentioned more than 30 case studies about how technologies help in achieving SDGs in different areas and in different regions of the world. So M-Pesa, that's what I presented, but there are a lot more in this report that you can check in the internet. It is available in the ICB Institute website and also in fintechimpact.org website. So also, when talking about second area is linking social finance and microfinance, we can use cash waqf, for example, fund to allocate those funds to microfinance institutions and to give free loans. And we can have cash waqf fund based allocated there will be 2, let's say, type of cash waqf funds. And this is an example that I took from my book. And I say, okay, the financial institution, there will be a partnership between microfinance institutions and Islamic financial institutions that can create 2 cash waqf funds, one for investment purposes based on free loans, and second one is allocated to, let's say, sukuk or investment accounts that is generating profit to the microfinance institutions to cover its expenses. And we can have zakat fund to help those who are in difficulty in the microfinance institution, for the customers of the microfinance institution, to cover their debt. So this way we can provide free loans. The microfinance institutions can cover its expenses, and the zakat fund can cover let's say, customers who are in need. Maybe in the book there are more details how to implement this scheme. There are also challenges to implement the scheme, etc. But this is just I try to give a high-level idea about how can we deal with social finance instruments and institutions to upgrade the business model of microfinance. So the third path is to see how we can improve the business model. So I said, if we adopt financial technologies, if we link Islamic social finance instruments with microfinance institutions, if we implement impact management and measurement processes in the microfinance institutions, so we will have very positive impact. First, we will reduce the management and administrative expenses of financial instruments. We will reduce the cost of transaction and make the financing affordable. And we can allocate resources to new, very small businesses and provide them with necessary accompaniment for all in this area. So another aspect, last aspect is, okay, what are, let's say, So the fourth aspect is how to create this. We have, I'd say, how to build financial ecosystems. This is a very interesting idea that I explored 4 years later. I'm trying to implement some ecosystems in the real world, but there are already ecosystems that are already implemented. And the idea, for example, when I link microfinance institutions with social finance institutions, this is a good step to start building sustainable finance ecosystems. And in this area, we will have what we call the provider of social finance and social enterprises. We'll have associations, NGOs. We will have also all the stakeholders that can participate in, influence, or are impacted by social investment activities. We will have investors. We have social enterprises that can finance, that I can accompany through my financial instruments. I can have NGOs. Once I have the profit, I can allocate it to those NGOs and to serve one specific or SDG or several SDGs. So the idea is, for example, I can focus on healthcare. So I will provide necessary funding to new businesses, new social enterprises that are covering this purpose. And then the benefit that I will get, the profit that I will get, I will pay it to NGOs or associations that are working in the same field in the healthcare, for example, area. So I think microfinance institutions can be part, or they can initiate themselves ecosystems. Maybe they are targeting one specific SDG, or maybe they are covering a specific geographical location. So I think this is to wrap it all up, because I think I already spent more than 20 minutes in my presentation. But the idea is that there are severe challenges. I think the most important challenge that is facing the humankind is climate change, with all the indirect effects, when the social pressure, the political instability, the pressure on water, on food security. All these aspects need to be handled and tackled by all the stakeholders. I think microfinance, since that most of the microfinance institutions are dealing with low-income segments and in rural areas, so maybe they are more concerned about the climate action, and they have to include this, let's say, this purposes in their own business model. So I try to give some paths of improvement. I then think Dr. Muhammad and Dr. Dakhli can give more insight about these initiatives in this area. Thank you. That's all for me. Thank you, Brother Ahmed. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. It was a very informative presentation. And now, Dr. Muhammad, you can start now, please.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'm just sharing my screen. Hopefully you will be able to see it imminently. And well, first of all, my gratitude to the Islamic Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture. It's a real great opportunity to be here. And as Ahmed also introduced me with, I actually started out at British Chambers of Commerce. So it feels like a homecoming to all of you. So I'm really pleased to be with former colleagues from various chambers of commerce. So it's great to be here. Today, I was asked to talk a little bit about the kind of controls for Islamic microfinancing, and especially how we deal with financing micro and small enterprises. And of course, you know this very well. Of course, micro and small enterprises are the backbone of many developing economies. They're really, really critical, of course, for economic growth and prosperity. So working with them and providing them working capital is absolutely critical, ultimately, for the national economy, for the regional economy, and also, of course, for the well-being of the citizens in your countries. So it's really a good starting point to look at a little bit more how we now more practically deal with issues of risk and reward. And I'm very grateful also to Dr. Ahmed Tahiri, for introducing actually this very important Islamic principle that there is no reward without risk. And I wanted to, however, turn this a little bit into a discussion and a little bit of a teaching session, if you like, about how we deal and manage the risks of working with medium and micro enterprises particularly. And of course, it's a little bit of an artificial sort of divide, but micro enterprises and small enterprises are informal businesses. So they don't have shareholders. They're not often registered with, maybe a security or exchange commission or whatever your country requires corporate businesses to be registered with. So they are running informally. They're also accounting, of course, it's their cash flows informally. They won't be audited. And that, of course, means that it's very, very challenging, of course, for you and for microfinance providers to work with them. Right. So again, as I said, I want to kind of, and I think I'm really grateful for Dr. Ahmed Tahir having set the scene, because it really beautifully leads to how I want to kind of position this kind of talk, because we have to see things through this kind of lens of risk and reward. And the criteria, if you like, of working with micro and small enterprises is really about a function of risk and reward. Of course, financing and business always has risks. There is nothing in business life and life generally without risks, obviously. So risk management is absolutely critical, not just in financial institutions, but also in any kind of business enterprise. But of course, today we're talking about financial institutions, microfinance institutions, Islamic microfinance institutions. So there are a number of different risks that I will talk in a little bit more detail in a minute. But just again, the criteria for financing MSMEs is really a function of risk and reward. And this means something different for different entities. The reward particularly is something that is, different. If you are a commercial entity, you will be primarily looking to receive a reward through profits. You want to share those profits with your shareholders for dividends, for example. And therefore, of course, your idea of a reward will be very much focusing on the profitability of financing MSMEs. Of course, others might have a social mandate, for example, perhaps public bodies, government organizations, and NGOs, perhaps, and many organizations also in the microfinance sectors. Many lenders have social missions, and they will also, as Dr. Ahmed Tahir pointed out, they will, of course, look at poverty reduction, climate change, and general, financial inclusion objectives. But again, this function of risk and reward is something that you will have to work out as a lender yourself. And primarily, what we do really is, these are sort of key terms.
Dr. Muhammad, I think we have an interruption for you, the connection from your side. So we will have to just wait until he joins us again.
I think my internet temporarily disconnected, but I'm back, and yes, I'm going back into the presentation. Hopefully that is visible again. Excellent. So I talked very briefly about the kind of main sort of issues in managing risks, and introducing some of the key terminology here, which is the risk appetite, which is really the amount and the type of risk that you as a lender are prepared to take. in order to obtain your objective. So we already said nothing in life or in business is without risks, but how much are you willing to tolerate in achieving, in trying to pursue what you're trying to do? And that's, of course, to do also with your corporate governance structure. So you might have different types of shareholders, public development organizations, which have maybe a government as a shareholder, might have a very different risk appetite from a private sector development organization that has primarily commercial objectives. But risk appetite is a really critical thing. So how much can you, appetite is a very good word here, how much can your organization stomach in terms of risks when you are pursuing your core business activities? And that, of course, is then related also, of course, to the risk exposure. How much risk are you exposed to, which means really the extent to which an entity is vulnerable to certain risks or a range of risks, a portfolio of risks. Again, we're not just often talking about one specific risk, but there might be a number of different things. And we have to understand really what these risks are and how they affect us. Exposure often is sort of used to calculate, if you like, sort of a gross measure of risks that takes account of, also the risk mitigation aspects, so, risk exposure is something that you look at.
I guess we lost Dr. Muhammad again, and we will be waiting to join us.
Apologies again, and apologies again. The internet in the UK is to blame for this, perhaps. But just continuing where I left off.
Sorry for interruption.
Yep, please.
I would like to ask you if you can move the slide by slide for the presentation.
Yeah.
Can we put the slideshow on instead of, because the screen is already like divided between two slides. So
okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I can go on to full screen mode. Yes.
Yes, that would be
Yeah.
good.
Did that work? Is that clearer now and more?
No, still we have the screen divided. We don't have only one slide. We have two slides in the same screen. So,
okay. Okay, we can.
Dr. Crossan, maybe if you are using two screens, you would like to share the screen that is appearing the slideshow mode.
Oh, yes, you are. Yeah. Okay, so let me do this again. Apologies for this to everybody.
No, no, no. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you are correct. So
Excellent.
I
Thank
should
you.
be
Thank
able
you, Dr.
to.
Mohammed. Thank you, Brother Mohammed.
Yes. Okay, Bismillah. Let's continue.
Just maybe to further enhance, and
Yep.
Dr. Crowson, now it is appearing in the draft show mode. Maybe you want to put it in slideshow mode, but keep while keeping the same screen. Do you think that might help?
Okay, yes, okay. Now that I was duplicating the screens, I should have the same screens now.
Perfect. Now it's
Yeah.
perfect.
Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. Excellent. So apologies again. Okay, so let's continue with the discussion on risk and reward. So as I said, risk appetite and risk exposure is something you will have to define for your own organization. And that really in turn then defines your criteria for financing micro and small enterprises. The main risk categories, if you like, sort of a risk taxonomy here in Islamic microfinance, also, in all microfinancing, and perhaps even in many business organizations, is really, as I show you on this graph, this diagram, really, we broadly differentiate between operational risks and financial risks. And that is really important because the mitigation techniques for both are different. Risk appetites can also be defined for these individual risks. So it's really quite important that you work out this sort of taxonomy of risks for your organization. On the operational risk side of things, there are a number of risks, human resource risks. So this is to do with employment law and contracting your staff so they are, that you fulfill all the obligations that you have under law towards your employees. Legal risks. Again, you might require an operating license, for example, to carrying out microfinance services, or reputational risks. We are all now very interconnected through social media, et cetera, et cetera. So it's also important to make sure, of course, that your brand, reputation is protected at all times, because it does carry a significant risk. And then, of course, particularly for Islamic finance and microfinance are Sharia non-compliance risks. And I will talk about this particular operational risk in a little bit more detail in a minute. Then on the financial risk side of things, there are credit risk, because you are lending money or you're doing different Islamic financing modes. Nevertheless, it does often create a broader credit risk. So your money is with an MSME, and you hope that they will repay you or will share a profit with you. That does create a risk, obviously. It does create a risk also very much related to liquidity, because obviously, in micro lending or in any kind of lending, particularly, of course, you're constantly turning over your working capital. You're lending, you're creating revenue streams, which you then also use, of course, to cover your own operating expenses. And that, of course, is a very delicate process to ensure that you're not just remaining liquid, but also, of course, solvent. And these are two different issues, but we can talk about these in a separate discussion. This is sort of a very high level run through financial risks. I will talk about credit risks again in another slide in a little bit more detail, particularly in regards to the criteria that we would look at when we are financing micro and small enterprises. There are market risks. It's very interesting. Again, Dr. Ahmed talked about cryptocurrency, perhaps, or touched upon it nearly. There are market risks also to do, for example, with the increase of staples or fuel prices that we see at the moment, that also have, of course, that we have a risk exposure to as a micro lender as well. Capital adequacy risks, often central banks will require a microfinance institution to have a certain level of capital before they give you a license. And this capital level will also be monitored by central banks, and that is also a critical financial risk. But let's now focus very briefly on those two specific risks, the credit risk and the Sharia non-compliance risks. And again, now risk and reward and looking at criteria for financing micro and small enterprises through that lens of risk and reward, in particular risk management. So criteria, are very much driven, as we said, by your risk appetite and by your exposure to risk. At the individual customer, beneficiary, client level, whichever language you use in your microfinancing operations, there are a number of areas that are really, really critical. There are, if you like, primarily about how you select who you want to work with. Of course, you might have an open door policy, so anybody could actually come and seek out your services, but that doesn't mean necessarily that you have to provide a financial service to everybody who comes to you. You have the right and also the choice to work with specific client groups. You might say our mission wants to focus particularly on female entrepreneurs. Women are particularly excluded, for example, from the marketplace or from the economy. Our mission as a microfinance institution is to work particularly or exclusively with female entrepreneurs. So that's a completely legitimate and important role that you can play. You might say we focus on a specific geographical area. We only work in this province or in the south of the country or worldwide. Or there might be particular industry sectors that you want to work with, agriculture, science, whatever it might be. Age, you could work just with youth. You want to work with graduates, or people under 25 to create a specific mission-based impact. So that's one thing. Of course, all of these will carry a specific risk exposure. If you work with people who are under 25, who might not ever have run a business before, that creates a certain risk exposure. If you work just in agriculture, Dr. Ahmed talked about climate change. Of course, agriculture carries a specific risk that you do need to be willing to work with. Also on the client side of things, we're talking about financial risks here particularly are what we call credit checks, okay? So again, you might say we cannot work with people who have already got a significant amount of debt, that have already borrowed maybe from another microfinance institution or from a bank or from family or friends. And also we want to check their general credit worthiness. There are agencies in many countries that do provide sort of credit checks that look at people's history. They have already a loan. How did they pay this loan back on time? Were there any delays in repayment? Do they still owe any money? And it creates sort of an individual credit score. That's something, again, legitimate and important for your risk management. You, again, have a mission. You do have a certain risk appetite, and you know how much risk exposure this particular client will give you. You will also carry out a business appraisal. You will, especially in the micro sector and also in the small enterprise sector, as we said, these businesses are informal. They do not have maybe bank accounts. They might not have proper financial records. They certainly are not audited. So you do not have any, if you like, and they're not registered with, chambers of commerce or Securities and Exchange Commission or whatever bodies you have in place. So there are no third-party assurances that you can take onto these companies, and therefore you will have to carry out your own business appraisal, which will primarily look at cash flows of a business, and that's easily done. Every company, even a small roadside store, will have cash flows that you can record and measure and analyze and appraise, and also it will look at, if you like, the balance sheet of a micro enterprise. And again, a balance sheet might be just one pocket with money and one pocket with debts, and that really gives you the assets and the liabilities even of a micro enterprise. And that's really, really important when you make a credit decision. So your criteria for lending or working with micro and small enterprises are based also on a business appraisal of these companies. You might have collateral requirements, not very, doesn't very often happen in microfinance. It's often unsecured lending that microfinance organizations are doing, but you might have a collateral requirement. Again, that is legitimate, also within the Islamic finance space, specifically depending, of course, on the type of product that you are using. One note very briefly here on the verification. I already mentioned it. We're working with informal businesses, so there are no audited accounts that you can inspect. They will not have a website that you can look at which publishes financial records. So it is really important that you and your organization have on-site monitoring in place. So you will very often pre-disbursement, as part of the business appraisal, you will visit a micro enterprise on site. So you will go to that roadside stall or the carpentry workshop, and you will see, is Ahmed or Mohammed or Fatima, are they really who they say they are? Is their business really where they claim it is? What are the customers like? You would speak to the neighbors. You might even speak to customers, because microfinance is also trust-based lending ultimately. We don't take collateral, we don't take security. So you will also get some kind of character reference in your on-site verification visit. And this is also something that's done after disbursement. So to make sure, for example, that when you do a profit and loss sharing kind of mudaraba or musharaka type of product, that of course, the cash flows are as the micro entrepreneur reports, and therefore on-site pre and post dispersal follow-up visits are really, really critical. Now, from the individual to the portfolio level criteria, of course, a microfinance organization or a bank ultimately will not just lend to one person. It will lend to hundreds and thousands and 10,000, 100,000 of micro entrepreneurs. And therefore, of course, they themselves, a portfolio of clients or customers, of course, now carry also a portfolio level risk that needs to be managed. Now, one way that we do this is through risk pools. For example, we are creating industry sector specific risk pools. As Dr. Ahmed has previously mentioned, climate change now creates a specific risk exposure to your customers who are working in agriculture, because harvest failure, cattle, livestock deaths have, especially also in West Africa, have, with cyclical drought around the Sahel, have of course increased over the last decade. So this is a specific risk pool. If you now happen to find out that all your portfolio is just in the agriculture sector, of course your risk exposure now becomes, much, much bigger. And the impact on the x-axis and the probability on the y-axis here helps you to map out how big the risk exposure really in this particular pool is. And this allows you then to also measure through what we call portfolio reports, where we do particularly look at the portfolio aging. So every of your clients or customers, when they have a loan from you or take a particular Islamic microfinance product, they will have a certain repayment schedule, perhaps that they have to stick to. We measure, their performance against portfolio at risk, which the acronym stands, PAR stands for. So portfolio at risk, we measure at 1 day. Is a customer or a client 1 day late with a repayment? That's not so much of a problem. Is he or she 30 days late? I missed 1 whole month of repayments. Now that's becoming a bit of a problem. And then of course, 90 days. So they haven't paid for 3 months, or 180 days, or so on and so forth. So it gives us, if you like, what we call portfolio aging. It gives us specific risks, because of delays in repayments. We can combine those now against our risk pool and say, okay, particularly now in the agriculture sector, we experience a lot of PAR 30s and a lot of PAR 90s. Okay, so the danger of farmers not repaying us is particularly high compared, for example, to the trade sector, where we do see 1 or 2 par 1s and some, par 90s, but actually the repayments are really good. So again, this tool allows you to manage those risks. And also again now, in terms of targeting your clients, the advice would be, unless you are for example, an agriculture specific, and I'm not talking about or against farmers, by the way, I'm just using them as an example at the moment. But say agriculture where give you a specifically or a disproportionately high risk exposure, you might say we have to diversify our portfolio. Let's not target some people who work in trade or small manufacturing so that we can reduce the overall portfolio risk that we have. So this is how this is done, and you can effectively, create a risk rating for each of these pools. So agriculture might be B minus, small manufacturing B, and so on and so forth. That allows you then to say overall we want to have we can tolerate our risk tolerance, our risk appetite was a B. We want to have overall our portfolio being at a B. Level risk, and that allows you again to manage those risks. Now, very briefly, some examples here. Again, some risk mitigation strategies or risk management strategies rather, because there are different ways of dealing with risks generally in microfinance and overall. This is sort of a generic risk management, if you like, concept. Because, and broadly speaking, you can deal in 4 different ways with risks. You can avoid risks. You can say we're not lending to farmers altogether. They're too high risk exposure for us. We don't lend to them. That's a very conservative approach. And really, broadly speaking, it's really just sort of the last resort to avoid lending to a particular pool altogether. You can transfer risks. There can be partially transfers, for example, to the customer or client themselves. You can factor in a risk element in your pricing, or you can get a credit guarantee from a donor or from a even commercial takaful provider, for example, in Islamic microfinance. Or you can say we are happy to retain this risk. We know there are issues, but we are driven by a social mission. We are funded maybe by the government. We are okay to retain this risk. Or we find ways, which is the main category where we can mitigate those risks. Okay, we know that there are certain risk exposures to the agriculture sector. We try to diversify our portfolio so that the exposure is not going to be too impactful. And other risk mitigation strategies that you might carry out yourself already, and so on and so forth. Then the other aspect, we talked about financial risks now, very briefly, the Sharia risk side of things, which we also have to manage actively as a Islamic microfinance provider. And of course, Sharia risk is a unique risk that Islamic financial institutions face. And that risk arises due to the possibility of, a client or yourself not perhaps complying with some of the Islamic finance principles, also that Dr. Ahmed had outlined before. So that's really, really critical, a critical dimension, of course, in Islamic finance and also for Islamic financial and microfinancial institutions. Now, broadly speaking, and I'm not going into this in great detail, this is sort of a completely different discussion, but I'm just mentioning it here, is the idea of Sharia screening. And the OIFI, which is the Auditing Accounting Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions, have set out product and governance standards and also a methodology for how you have to screen, have to assess, have to appraise an organization that you want to work with. For us, when we work with micro and small enterprises, it primarily means that their business activities are halal. Okay, so this is specifically, of course, for the Islamic sector. So an Islamic microfinance institution cannot really work, of course, with an alcohol producing company or drugs, or also, of course, importantly, it cannot, of course, also work with organizations that are themselves involved in conventional financial services that create interest income. There is a recognition, however, that interest is something that, because the vast majority of economies around the world are, of course, conventional, if you like, that of course interest is something that a small exposure to no one can avoid, and therefore there is an allowance given that your dealing with interest should not be more than 5%. So that's again something that's done, as I said, through the Sharia screening, and that would require sort of a bigger, more detailed discussion. But again, this is really one of the key risks on the operational side of things that makes Islamic microfinance unique. And we can perhaps talk about Sharia governance and the like at another stage, or maybe in the Q&A. Well, finally, just two takeaways really: risk and reward, and you need an effective risk management approach at client level, working through business appraisals, and also at portfolio level, as I said, through creating portfolio level risk management tools. Now, one thing that Ahmed, when he introduced me, had forgotten to mention is that I'm also a lecturer at the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management, which is a German business school, and we do actually have a separate course in Islamic microfinance. And if you wanted to know more about all these techniques that I spoke with about today, that's the place to go. There's a website here that tells you more about the program, and it does cover, general Islamic economic and finance principles. It covers all the Islamic finance contracts that we use, and also, of course, how you manage a Islamic microfinance operation. And we have a separate module also on risk management, which I teach. And also we talk about the regulated governance and Sharia compliance aspects, and importantly, financial and social performance management. I hope that's sort of given you a high-level overview of how we implement this Islamic concept of there is no reward without risk. And I hand over back to Ahmed for the next session.
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad. Very interesting presentation. Me, myself, I'm having a lot of comments regarding the risk and rewards. We'll leave it to the end of the session. Now we go to Mr. Muhammad Dakhli. Mr. Muhammad.
Thank you very much, Brother Ahmed.
You can start now.
So let me share my screen, and maybe please help me by confirming whether or not you see the right one.
Yes.
Perfect. So are you seeing the slideshow mode?
Yeah, it's on the show mode, yes.
Perfect. You're not seeing the presenter view
No,
mode?
no.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the invitation. So on the name of the Islamic Development Bank, we highly thank you for inviting us to contribute to this workshop and the efforts of the Islamic Chamber of Commerce, Trade and Agriculture is well known in promoting Islamic finance and working towards finding ways and means to increase exposure and work in the sector of Islamic microfinance specifically. Thanks also to your guests, Dr. Mohammed Krosen and Dr. Tahri, for having shared with us some of the insights about the work that they are doing. And I think this is really important in paving the way and introducing the concepts of Islamic microfinance and Islamic finance in general to the general public. And I hope during my presentation, I'll try to shed the light more specifically on the experience of the Islamic Development Bank and the work that it has been doing, and the way forward, hopefully, in that perspective. So let me know if the slides are moving, or it is still the cover page. Are the slides moving?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So I'll start with a brief presentation of the Islamic Development Bank Group for those that are to whom the group is not known. Then I'll move to to presenting the Islamic Development Bank approach when it comes to access to finance through the economic empowerment, or the economic empowerment through Islamic finance. Then I'll try to present some case studies from the ground on some projects that ISDB has funded. And I'll be concluding by briefly presenting three toolkits that the ISDB has prepared in partnership with several partners and actors in the field on how to help financial institution implement economic empowerment model. So, the Islamic Development Bank Group, for those that are not familiar with, was established in 1975, and so initially as the Islamic Development Bank itself, and then step by step was increasing entities to establish in 1981 the Islamic Institute for Research and for the IRTI, so the well-known Islamic Research and Training Institute, that now rebranded to be the ISDB Institute, and then established the Islamic the ISEC, that is the entity that is dedicated to ensuring investment and providing takaful services for foreign trade. And after that was the establishment of the ICD, which is the entity or the group arm that is dedicated to the private sector, providing line of finance for financial institutions and private sector companies to support them in various development activities. And finally, last but not least, the creation of the Islamic Trade, the ITFC, the entity or the group arm that is specialized in financing international trade between member countries and with the member countries and other countries for the benefit of the member countries. So the key feature of the group is that it is roughly the MDB or the Multilateral Development Bank of the Islamic world. It is a South institution, and it is a solidarity based, and hopefully so it is branding and also doing efforts in providing Sharia compliant financial services. So I'll go quickly to the second aspect of my presentation today by introducing sharing some history of the work of the Islamic Development Bank when it comes to poverty alleviation. So in the beginning of 2000s, the ISDB started to move from mainly focusing on infrastructure projects to try to focus on poverty alleviation interventions from another side. Of course, infrastructure projects help a lot in alleviating poverty. However, there are quicker means to alleviate poverty, and the bank started to explore some initiatives to provide the first interventions in the world or in the area of access to finance. So the bank started with projects in Guinea, then so with basically access to finance and capacity building, then step by step provided financing to Tunisia, then to Benin, then to Palestine, etc. So and started to explore what are the ways and means to increase each intervention. From each intervention, the bank was learning, and it was a continuous learning process that was the result of more than 65 intervention in the field of microfinance with more than $500 million approved financing that have contributed to the creation of more than 1 million jobs. So during all these years, and with the cumulative knowledge, there are some case studies or some interventions that were specifically shining and that were achieving great results in terms of impacting the field, and also on how they were treating how they were dealing with these ISDB contribution or financing. And some of the experiences that were awarded. We recall the Palestine, the D program. I'll try to shed the light on the intervention later. So it was rewarded the Palestine International Award for Excellence in 2011. Also, an intervention have won the Best Agriculture and Rural Finance Product in 2017, and an intervention in Egypt that was selected among 850 projects to be featured in the Paris Peace Forum in 2020, and an intervention in Sudan that won the Ethical Finance Innovation Challenge and Awards in 2014. So, and one of the main features that were common with all these interventions is the focus on ecosystem-based interventions, and not only focus on financial inclusion or access to finance only. So, and based on all these interventions, we have learned that the main obstacles that are hindering the poor from changing his situation are and roughly in the are 6 main obstacles. First, the difficulty in accessing well-designed and profitable project opportunities due to the social, the low social capital of the poor, or because of the lack of capacity to do business planning, to look for best opportunities, etc., etc. A lot of reasons could hinder the poor from accessing well-designed and profitable project opportunities. Second is the lack of intelligent partnerships supporting the poor economic activity. And again, this is due to the environment that the poor could find himself in. The low social capital, lack of connections, and also the lack of belief of the private sector in working as partners with poor people, which is something that we are seeing every day, even in our normal lives, not specifically related to the development work. The third aspect is the insufficiency of affordable and appropriate supporting infrastructure. When it comes to warehouses, when it comes to production factors, etc., etc. So this may be very costly. Some poor in some sectors try to bridge the gap or try to find solution for this through cooperative interventions. Those cooperatives may buy production factors, etc. But this is a real problem that is not always been solved. Another aspect is the hardship or the difficulty in accessing relevant markets. We know in several countries that some of the sectors that the poor may be active in are highly oligopolistic or sometimes even monopolistic. So it is really difficult for a poor person, or sometimes even a small group of poor person, to sell their production in a with I would say a fair price and get the maximum out of that production. So a lot of middlemen would intervene in the process. So, and the poor will find himself having a financing from a microfinance institution, having to pay the debt and the interest, and sometimes even the profit margin when the poor is taking his financing from an Islamic finance institution, but at the same time having great difficulties in selling his production. Even he had produced something with good quality. Sometimes the quality is the problem, but we may see together how we can solve that type of challenge. The other aspect is the lack of capacity, and also, and most importantly, the weak belief in self-potential. A lot of financial inclusion interventions may be focusing also on the capacity, building the capacity, but which capacity are we building? Which confidence are we building for the poor? And are we involving him as a partner, or just merely as a client with a specific narrow of intervention? And the last thing I wanted to mention today is the lack of access to an appropriate funding. And as you see here, I intentionally mentioned this by the end, because we have tendency to mention that the highest problem or the biggest problem is the access to finance, but the issue and the experts around the table today may agree with me that if we are providing the access to finance with a lack of accessibility to other ingredients of success, we may have a poor that is today indebted and that needs to reimburse his debt with no big potential of going out of that situation. And also it is really important to provide the appropriate funding, not only funding. And as a lot of you clearly know that some of the needs may be tackled by murabaha, some other needs may be tackled by ijara, mudaraba, musharaka, salam, depending on the need. And sometimes we can provide the financing, but if it is not tackling the appropriate need, we are not really helping the poor. We are even making his situation even worse. So I'll go quickly to the summary of the things that we would like to tackle in our intervention in the Islamic Development Bank. So the objective, as you see here, is try to move from merely a financial inclusion that may be tackling access to microinsurance, access to saving accounts, access to financial education and loan for basic needs, toward a more comprehensive approach that is targeting his economic inclusion or his or her economic empowerment by considering the poor as an economic actor in the process, providing him with access to relevant markets to his needs, also sharing with him profitable investment opportunities, and supporting him or the group of actors in specific sector with the relevant supporting and affordable infrastructure. Also providing him with smart partnerships, with win-win partnerships with private sector actors, NGOs, governmental actors, and build his capacity and his resilience and self-confidence, and finally provide him with the appropriate funding that will help the poor generate more income, but also have better access to opportunities. So in a very brief manner, if I would summarize the business model of economic empowerment interventions, that will deal with a funding entity that or a financial entity on the ground that will do engineering of economic empowerment projects, whether individual projects for individuals or for groups, will tackle specific sectors. We believe that the microfinance institution should be focusing on sectors that are leveraging more opportunities for the poor, but at the same time needs to be sectors that are profitable for the financial institution, with the objective of having a win-win relationship with the poor. The microfinance institution or the financial institution should, in our understanding, do the effort of engineering opportunities, building or creating partnerships with private sector actors that are working in those area in a specific value chain, and try to build together and engineer together the interventions. So as you see here, it is really important to have strategic partners in each sector the microfinance institution is willing to work in, and provide the final beneficiary with the necessary capacity building, technical assistance, adequate financing, and the access to markets through the strategic partner that the economic empowerment institution will be working in or working with in a specific value chain in a specific sector. So I want to so now let's maybe deep dive in specific cases. I'll try to be very brief, not to take much time, and to maybe leave the way and let our audience ask any questions they would like to ask to the audience. I would like to share with you the deep project or the deep program that the Islamic Development Bank and other actors from the Arab Coordination Group has funded in Palestine, which is the deprived families economic empowerment program. So that program specifically targeted to provide a protective social safety net activities to end beneficiaries. You know, the situation in Palestine is quite unique when you compare it to several member countries or Islamic countries around the world. So here it is really important to provide social safety net in the framework of that intervention that will fulfill the basic needs before going to higher needs. Also, it provided capacity building activities for intermediary institutions and beneficiaries, and worked with the financial intermediaries or the microfinance institution to provide financing, Islamic financing, to fulfill the need of those beneficiaries. So the main figures of the impact of the DEEP program are they have funded more than 60,000 projects in different regions in Palestine. They have contributed to the creation of 50,000 jobs in Palestine. So they have increased the income for beneficiaries with an average of $158 per month. $158 per month, and roughly $2,000 per month for the beneficiaries. And it was officially the way and the way of doing or the way of implementing this program has influenced the governmental policies, and even had an important impact in ICB's intervention that brought as a consequence of the, it started with the program in 2008, as you see, but now the bank has established a dedicated economic empowerment fund with a target capital of $500 million for Palestine to invest with financial institutions, with a contribution coming from the Islamic Development Bank, of course, but also from the Islamic Solidarity Fund for Development, and from private sector that are contributing to this fund as one of the biggest, I would say, Islamic impact investing funds in the region, and even, I would say, even in the world. So, so the objective of this fund is to provide line of finance for financial institutions, also contribute directly to successful companies that have the potential to work with the poor and to benefit the poor, with all the difficulties that all of you are aware of to work in the field. This is a big challenge, but the fund is putting and paving the way for a more impact-oriented investment or business opportunities creation in Palestine. So, for the second case I would like to share with you today is coming from Sudan, whereby the Islamic Development Bank has participated in the equity in the capital of Bank al Khartoum in Sudan, to create and also later participated in the capital of a dedicated microfinance institution that is called Irada. And interestingly, they have worked in some initiatives with several partnerships in the ground. So they have the idea started with the Sudanese Strategic Food Reserve that wanted to efficiently purchase harvests from individual farmers instead of just buying from everyone, but at the same time not having to deal with the middleman that will come and sell the quantities, sell bigger quantities, but with a higher price, with no direct or fair benefit to the end beneficiary. And so the objective was social slash profit oriented for the food reserve. So this has discussion were made with the Bank al Khartoum and with some important actors in Sudan, including ministries, Zakat Chamber, World Food Program, and they work together on putting and studying the feasibility on working with group of farmers. And finally, the Bank Al Khartoum provided a line of finance of $8 million that would finance the seed purchase, will finance also the land development, and also as working capital during the harvest. So here, as we see, the financial institution took or did a more active role rather than just waiting beneficiaries to share their business plans, etc. They helped in conducting the technical feasibility study. And here the Ministry of Agriculture provided extensive training on the technical training for those farmers, and the food and the World Food Program provided some safety net for farmers during the planting period, and the poor or the farmers have been gathered in union to ease the work with them, and to also to ease even their power of bargaining or negotiation with these important entities. And they have been linked by this process with the market, which is here the Sudanese Strategic Food Reserve. You would agree with me that me or you going to the Sudanese Strategic Reserve to sell its production doesn't have the same power of bargaining when a group of farmers that are well financed and well assisted go to the Sudanese Strategic Food Reserve with institution backing them and to sell their production. So I will not. So as very quickly here about the structure, it was involving Mudaraba financing that would go from Bank Al Khartoum to other commercial banks that are involved in the process, and also the Bank Al Khartoum or Irada at that time, it was just inside entity, so provided financing to infrastructure and facility to the agricultural cooperatives. So different modes of finance have been used, from Mudaraba to Salam to Murabaha, etc., and to finally sell the production to the Strategic Food Security Reserve. The second business case I would like to share with you very quickly is, let me just remove the this in order to see better. So it is maybe I'll try to share another example. This case also coming from Sudan. I'll be accused of being biased towards Sudan. So let me share another business case from another country, from Egypt, whereby the youth employment support project that was financed by the Islamic Development Bank has worked with the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises development agency in Egypt to provide micro and small to provide financing for micro and small enterprises. So a successful NGO came and proposed to work with MESMIDA, so the executing agency or the financing agency, and called Ard Al Khair, and came with the proposal. So this NGO has a social business that is called Ard Al Khair Incubator. It's a cattle fattening incubator based in a rural area in Egypt. So they came with the proposal to of Ard Al Khair NGO providing the necessary training for beneficiaries, and also providing them with access to markets, and with MESMIDA providing the financial services needed to finance buying cows or cattle from abroad, and then incubating the farmers, they can be already exercising the activity in their own homes, but they could be also new people to the business that would like to be incubated for a certain period. So so they went through a 6-month process whereby they come physically each day to oversee the cattle that they have bought through the financing. They will do all the process of cleaning, checking the health, or checking doing all the necessary checks during the day in a farming process, and assisted by technical experts in each field, from veterinaries to technical people that will help them in how to provide the food for the animal, etc., etc. So and after that, so during that period, there are even paid salaries for attending that training, and after that, they keep their relationship with this incubator with a bunch of experts from providing their knowledge in different sectors. And with that, they once they graduate, they can keep their activity on their own, and they are able to pay back the financing that they have received and develop their businesses. So as you see here, it's a tripartite agreement between three main actors: the young partners, women or men, and the Mesmida, the financier, and Ard al Khair incubator. So each one needs to have. So it is really crucial, as you see here, to have a win-win partnership between all these actors to make it work and to make it last. It's important. It's really important for the sustainability and for the impact on the beneficiaries. Last but not least, I would like to share with you an intervention from Tunisia. So the institute that was implemented by Zaytuna Tamkeen Institution, one of the institutions that the Islamic Development Bank has contributed to its capital, and it worked with the main dairy producer in the country to set up an economic empowerment project benefiting so around 2,500 small-scale breeder in the country. So the idea started with this dairy company having the difficulty of having standardized quality and quantities during the times where we have a lack of production. And it's, as you know, it is really difficult to deal with the beneficiaries themselves.
Brother Muhammad, sorry for interruption, but I just want to a kind reminder that we are running out of time. So I would be grateful if we can wrap up or summarize the rest.
Definitely. Let me, definitely.
I'm sorry for the interruption. I'm sorry for that.
Sure. I'll spend maybe 30 seconds more on this case and then move to the last part. Thank you very much for the reminder. So, so to be very quickly, the work was done by the Zaytuna Tamkeen Institution with the major dairy provider in the country, Delis Danone, that worked with the milk collectors in the regions, and with the help also for Tamkeen for Development NGO when it comes to coaching, assistance, training, etc. So the interesting thing here is that Delis Danone, as expert in a specific value chain, provided also its expertise on the quality, what is the quality required, what are the quantities, etc., etc. So this represents the access to market. So the beneficiary knows what are the conditions to access a good market here. And but of course, the collection in the remote areas will be done by collection centers that will be deducting installment on behalf of Zaytuna Tamkeen. And here, the institution is tried to avoid granularity in working with beneficiaries, which is an element that highly impact the cost of microfinance institutions, but at the same time providing quality service for the beneficiaries with the help of other actors. By this, let me go. You'll find all these lessons learned in the slides I have shared with the organizers, but let me maybe move very quickly to presenting the 3 toolkits that the Islamic Development Bank has published last year during the annual meeting in Uzbekistan that tackles several aspects of economic empowerment operations. So these 3 manuals are oriented to financial institutions to help in order to contribute in the education effort for financial institutions. First, work with Islamic financial products. Second, to even for Islamic financial institutions to orient their business toward more comprehensive approach of economic empowerment, rather than just merely providing Islamic financial services. So the first toolkit would share some insights how microfinance institution then can implement the economic empowerment methodology by analyzing value chains with the highest potential. And here again, it's really important that the microfinance institution chooses what are the value chains to target, not necessarily to target all value chains. Let's be more focused and more and build some expertise and added value in a specific value chains. Also, it provides guidance on how this analysis could be done once we have identified the value chains that we will be working on, and how to identify and pursuing business opportunities with their clients or partners. It also includes details case studies. Some of the case studies that I have had the honor to share with you today are mentioned in those toolkits, with a lot of other business cases as well that came from field expertise of institutions working on the ground. The second toolkit will provide you with a step-by-step. It's mainly as you see on the name, it is Islamic Financial Product Implementation Toolkit. So it will provide you a step-by-step guide for the financial institution, how to structure and implement commonly used Islamic modes of finance, from Qard Hasan to Murabaha to Ijara to Musharaka to Mudaraba, and Salam, etc., etc. So, and also it provides practical examples and templates that can be adapted to various regulatory regimes or jurisdictions, and it really simplifies adopting Islamic financial products for institutions that are starting the process or that try to enhance the process they have. The last toolkit I wanted to introduce to you today is the monitoring and evaluation toolkit, which is a comprehensive guide for financial institutions to practice self-evaluation of their performance. It also helps them to monitor the impact, social performance, financial performance, and practice self-rating. And also this provides the institution the capacity to know what are the indicators to focus on when requesting for line of finance from donors, and try to raise awareness about the impact that it is achieving on the ground to help donors better understand the impact and encourage donors to provide it with a line of finance. So these toolkits are in English, available on the website of the Islamic Development Bank. And the good news I wanted to share with you today as well is that the Arabic version of those toolkits will be officially launched in Egypt between the 1st and the 4th of June during the annual meeting of the Islamic Development Bank Group in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. So the Arabic version will be officially launched and available on the website. And also the French version work is on progress on the French version that should be published very soon later this year. With this, thank you very much for listening to me, and please feel free to ask any questions during the Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed Dakhli. Thank you. It was very interesting presentation. And now we have a couple of questions. Mr. Diallo was asking how, I've translated, how to obtain finance or funds for commercial activities, and how, where I can get finance and partners. This is the first part of the question. The second one is that he wants to know how to start finding a fund for a project that he's saying according to the Islamic laws. So whom shall he contact in order to start this project? Mr. Mohammed Dakhli, can you, or Dr. Mohammed?
Sure. maybe it would be interesting to know what is the country that the attendee is working in.
Actually, it is not clear
But
here.
in general, maybe if I had to respond to this question from the Islamic Development Bank perspective, the ISDB works with financial partners that are working in the countries, as it is mainly a donor that provides whether lines of finance to governments to implement Islamic finance projects through the governmental entities, or deals with private sector entities that are working in the country. So but in both cases, the first entity to deal with for businesses would be the entity practicing Islamic finance in the country itself. So regardless maybe of the country of from which our guest is in which our guest is doing his business.
Okay. And there is another question that regarding the Sharia risk, and this is to Dr. Muhammad Kraisen. How it can be considered as a risk since it is already known before starting the project. In other words, it cannot be treated under the symmetric information model that all the information is known before starting the project. So I would argue that it can't be considered as risk. Therefore, its premium can be excluded and not transferred or paid by any stakeholder. This is the first part of the question. The second one is there another criteria other than faith that can be used in order to ensure the repayment of a loan, since interest rate is prohibited or determined on a very low base? Or shall it be modified in its calculations in the mathematical financial treatment so not be considered as riba?
Okay, thank you for the question. Obviously, in my presentation, I have tried to keep it relatively pragmatic. So there are different approaches, obviously, at looking at risk management. But broadly speaking, obviously, the issue around Sharia non-compliance risk can also, of course, be seen potentially as a financial risk to the organization itself. I did primarily focus on the non-compliance aspect that may arise from a microfinance organization, an Islamic microfinance organization providing a Islamic product to a business that actually hasn't got a core business activity that may actually be outside what is considered to be halal, if you like. Of course, the other aspect that is also interesting is, that it might actually, ex post transpire that perhaps the Islamic microfinance division or the bank has perhaps earned, through some process errors, perhaps earned a non-compliant income itself, which of course then creates, of course, a financial Sharia non-compliance risk. But it's nevertheless a risk that we have to deal with. You're right. It's primarily a risk that Islamic financial institutions, if you like, either mitigate by having, a Sharia supervisory internal governance structure in place that screens all the customers, also looks at the internal processes to ensure that these cannot happen. Or if you say that it's a known risk, they're happy to retain that risk because broadly speaking, perhaps in their socioeconomic context, perhaps Sharia non-compliance risks perhaps are very unlikely to arise, or are already, if you like, known. For the second question, was it was it faith that you mentioned, a trust that I spoke about? Yes, so of course there are different ways of how microfinance organizations also deal with that asymmetry of information, perhaps, that arises out of a trust-based banking relationship. So one way that was popularized by Mohammed Yunus with the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, of course, was to create this social collateral system where you group individual customers, clients together and create a social collateral. Actually, it was originally a joint liability. That's of course a conventional arrangement. That joint liability really isn't. There are some Sharia non-compliance aspects to a joint liability. So why should I be responsible for Ahmed's, Ahmed not paying his loan? But that was one of the ways of dealing with trust, because yes, you are right. There is this asymmetry information. Of course, we as a microfinance provider are exposed to, of course, we're dealing with human beings. We are not dealing with angels. So human beings. There will be a small proportion of our customer base that we're actually trying to also, through that screening in the beginning, we're trying to whittle out. But there will always be some perhaps that are perhaps not entirely, honest with us. And we do need to have also systems in place. So a collateral system has now moved on. The social collateral system has now moved on from joint liability to more of a, if you like, community sort of self-policing approach. So you know that your neighbor received this cow on Murabaha, for example. If they suddenly invite you to a big dinner and eat the cow and then say to the group, no, the cow, run away or someone stole it, then there's something not quite right. And it creates sort of a more, it reduces that moral hazard because it creates a more transparent system where everybody is accountable to the group, not in terms of financial liability, but in terms of moral accountability. So that's one way of how the trust is not just a complete naive concept, but actually financial institutions are actually dealing with that. But I wanted to stress when I said trust is we're working with informal businesses. Don't ask them for their audited accounts for the last 3 years. They might not even have a bank account. They might not do proper financial reporting or accounting. They will very, very certainly not have PwC or one of the big 4 auditing firms doing their annual returns. So that's the emphasis here on trust. But trust is not a naive endeavor. It's something that financial institutions, of course, also are dealing with in a systematic way within that idea of risk management.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mohammed. And let me conclude the workshop for today. Thank you for attending today's workshop. It was the 3rd workshop, which has discussed formulations of implementing Islamic microfinance. And this workshop was organized by the ICCIA, represented in the holding company and sponsored by Al Baraka Forum for Islamic Economy. And I thank you all for attending, and I'm honored, and I'm sure it was an interesting and very informative presentation. And I invite you all to attend tomorrow's workshop. It will be about sustainable tourism, and our next regional workshop on microfinance, that will be on the 14th and 15th of June. It will be hybrid, in person and online. And I would like you all to attend. And thank you again. Thank you, Dr. Mohammed Qasim. Thank you, Mr. Mohammed Dakhli. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed Tahri. And thank you all.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you. Have a good